Hey, everybody, welcome to the Consistently Good podcast. I am your host, Jeff Cunningham, and today I am excited to actually talk about something that I think is first and foremost on a lot of people's minds when it comes to looking at participation in the running space, looking at the movers and the shakers in the running space, the people who are most relevant and significant in the running space. And what we're talking about is the monetization of participation in track and field and distance running on the roads and marathoning. And we're going to talk about it from the standpoint of sort of buckets that people are in. And the fact that they intersect, I think, is what makes running, quite frankly, so unique in the sports world. When we look at the modern internet age and we look at Facebook and then, of course, Instagram and other social media platforms and the opportunities that they provide for social media influencers, and then more specifically, running influencers and fitness influencers in the modern age, and how they can monetize their space that they've carved out in the running world and in the endurance space. And then we look at what we sort of generically refer to or commonly refer to as pro runners, the pros, professional runners, and how they occupy that space, and sort of the fact that they were sort of the only ones who were sort of occupying the, shall we say, the monetized space in track and field and road racing and distance running. We're going to pretty much limit this to, distance running, but it's track and field and it's athletics. And globally, it's referred to as athletics, which is the participation in track and field, cross country and distance running on the roads, right? And what's cool about it is this, and we need to be thinking about this globally, is, when you talk about social media influencers and you talk about running influencers, you don't really have the same corollary when we look at the NBA, when we look at the NFL, right? For instance, you don't have an influencer who's an NFL influencer or a football influencer, right, on the same field with Pat Mahomes, right, at the same time. Right? You don't have a NBA influencer on the same court in Los Angeles with LeBron James at the same time. It just doesn't happen. I mean, you see it happen, but those are the people who get chased down by security and tackled, much to the delight and the roars of the crowd. And usually somebody's tossing beer out on the field and laughing hysterically as some clown gets tackled in center field during the World Series. They're not on the same field. Well, that's not the same thing. When you look at professional runners, your Eliud Kipchoge's, right? Your Connor Manses, who just broke the American record at the Chicago Marathon, are on the same starting line, okay, with social media influencers, or at the very least in the same race, right? You don't see that in other sports. So it's interesting when you see the intersection of the two. And so I'm going to be talking about that here today, and not just sort of how they got where they got, but also looking at the very, very real pressures and the different pressures and the different influences and the different considerations for all of these people who are engaged in this unbelievably beautiful sport that has literally changed my life, and I think has probably changed many of yours, mostly for the better, I would say, almost exclusively for the better. But to know how we got where we are, to know where we could be going, it's always insightful, instructive, and sometimes entertaining to look back at where we came from. Now, when you look at running and we analyze what's referred to as the Olympic movement, it was always grounded in amateurism. And we see that in the actual names of the governing bodies of the sport that were in charge of track and field, cross-country racing, road racing worldwide, up until literally just a few years ago. Specifically, I'm referring to the International Amateur Athletic Federation, which was the governing body of all track and field, cross country, and road racing worldwide up until 2019, at which point their name changed to World Athletics, right? Of course, the A being amateur. And then in the United States, all the way up until 79, 80, 81-ish was the Amateur Athletic Union, which then became the Athletics Congress, which then eventually changed their name to USA Track and Field, commonly referred to as USATF, which is the governing body of not just track and field, but cross country and road racing in the United States. When we look at the genesis of this in the United States, there were some races that were for profit, pay, prize money, but that all ended essentially in 1888, which is really nuts to think about, right? Because that was right when all the other professional sports leagues, or the era in which the other professional sports leagues came into being, or at least the precursors and the predecessors to the modern day NFL, NBA, etc., right? And well, the problem is cheating was so rampant, and dishonesty was a thread that ran through all of these staged races and these races for pay, that in 1888, they outlawed any prize money or any profit that anybody could make in the running space, whether it's sprinting, whether it was distance running in the United States. And so the solution was to make it all amateur. So the AAU, the Amateur Athletic Union, governed running all the way up through 1979. And then the Amateur Sports Act of 1978 brought TAC, the Athletics Congress, into being, which was in place until it was sort of changed into USA Track and Field, I believe, in 1992. Everything that sort of changed it all actually was in 1981. And this was after Steve Prefontaine's, who's had set 14 American records, one of the most famous, if not the most famous runner of all time, right, in the United States, fought the good fight for years and years and years, and actually threatened to boycott the Olympic Games in 1976. His untimely passing in 1975 prevented him from obviously ever going to Montreal and competing in the 1976 Olympics. But after Munich 72, Prefontaine said, listen, I'm not running for free anymore. I've done my duty here. I have worn the stars and stripes, the red, white, and blue, went and finished fourth in the Olympic Games in Munich in 72. And he says, I'm done running for free. I should be able to get paid. 1981, the Cascade Runoff in Portland, Oregon, deliberately, along with the assistance of Nike, offered prize money. And the AAU lost their mind. The IAAF, the International Amateur Athletic Federation, lost their mind. 4 athletes from New Zealand actually accepted pay, right? And they were actually banned for a 2-week span until there was basically this knockdown, drag-out fight in Rome, in which they finally said, okay, we're going to redefine the term amateur, and basically we're going to say that amateur doesn't really mean amateur anymore. Bizarre, but that was the solution. It all got hashed out. Runners were able to be paid. By the time we got to 1986, and this is kind of crazy to me because I was 11 at the time, 1986 was the first time the Boston Marathon offered any prize money at all for the champions. This is even more mind-boggling. 2024, as in last year, was the first year Olympic gold medalists were officially offered prize money by World Athletics for winning an Olympic gold medal. That, I know that sounds absolutely insane, but all the money that was earned by Olympic gold medalists, for instance, for winning the gold medal specifically, was either individual payouts by their nation's federations if they were offering any such prize money, and then endorsements that would come with it, right? You'd be on the front of the Wheaties box, right? If you won the 400-meter dash at the Olympics, if they decided that's what they were going to do, you would get paid. But you didn't actually get paid for winning the Olympic gold medal itself, which is bonkers. And so you look at this, and you look at baseball, football, the NBL, which was the National Basketball League before the National Basketball Association, back in the late 1800s, early 1900s, we had pro leagues, we had pro teams. People were salaried, not a lot, but track and field, cross country, road racing, it literally took until the 1980s before anybody got paid. So in that context, you look at, well, what does it mean to be a pro? In the NBA, you get drafted, and if you don't get drafted into the NBA, you can go to the developmental league, or you can go over to Europe, or you can go to Israel. They have pro leagues there, Australia, and the such, right? But most people never make it that far, and it's very defined, and you know you're either a pro or you're not. It's very binary. The NFL, it's even more so. I mean, you literally have two legitimate leagues, really. You've got the Canadian Football League, the CFL, and then, of course, the NFL. Well, in running, it's not that simple. You go to a local race, you win a race, you make $250 for winning, the Firecracker 5K, right? For going winning the Littleville 10K, you go win your $250. I mean, technically, does that make you a pro? By the definition of the word, yes. And so it's really sort of amoebic as to what being a pro runner really means. Not nearly as glamorous as it might be made out to be or thought to be by folks that may not be completely aware of the dynamics of it, right? Professional runners versus Instagram influencers versus content creators versus fitness influencers, professional runners, and the line gets blurred, and we're going to talk about this. Professional runners tend to get their money from professional contracts with endemic sponsors, typically apparel sponsors, shoe sponsors. That's the bulk of their money. And then they get some of their money from incentive-based contracts where you achieve a certain time. You qualify for a certain race. You qualify for a certain international championship, you'll get this much. And then, of course, you get other deals with brands, possibly wearables, possibly a nutrition brand, and you cobble these things together and try to make a living that way, right? Now, the internet age has changed so much, right? And this is where old Coach is going to bore you guys with the fact that he's 50 and he remembers when cell phones did not exist. Coach remembers when the internet did not exist. I was actually regaling some folks before I came on today with the tales of our TRS-80 computer that we got in the early 1980s from Radio Shack that had an external cassette drive where you would save computer programs, right, on a cassette. And we would hook the computer up to an actual television. There wasn't an actual computer monitor, right? Well, now, of course, we have Instagram and we have other social media platforms where it's changed marketing. When I was a young guy, we would get publications, and I was already a running nerd back when I was a kid, when I was 10, 11 years old, watching that Boston Marathon on television, right? The first year that they offered any money. The funny juxtaposition was that same year, the Red Sox in Boston also made the World Series and played the New York Mets, right? And the difference between watching Doc Gooden pitch for the Mets and watching Dennis the Oil Can Boyd pitch for the Boston Red Sox, and then the fact that that was the first year that they offered any money in the Boston Marathon sort of shows you the difference between the two professional sports and where they were at the time. But you have to understand that I come from a place when nobody was getting paid or almost nobody was making any money in it. And then we look now at where we are. And social media has changed everything, because I would wait by the mailbox. And I remember Runner's World would come once a month. And I literally would plow through that thing in one afternoon, reading every single page, absorbing every single race report, every story about a famous runner, whether it was Jumia Kanga from Tanzania, right? Or Brian Sheriff, who was one of the great, road racers in the United States at the time, and Mark Kerp. These guys, we just talk about it, right? You waited for it. But the ads, Nike, Asics Tiger back then, which is now just Asics, right? The full page ads, and that was one-way marketing that would be from shoe companies and from apparel companies to you. There was no back and forth. There was no interplay. There were no influencers back then. The only people making any money at all in the sport in the late 80s and even into the early 90s were just people who were professional runners. And then you would make money if you owned maybe a running shoe store, a retail outlet. You were, selling running shoes in a mall, right? That would be about it. And then this wild thing called the internet happened. And then social media happened. And in the last 10 years, and I tell you what, especially even in the last 5 to 7 years, everything has changed. And so now you have influencers, and you have micro influencers, you have macro influencers, you have mega influencers, and then the smallest number, of course, we refer to as nano influencers, like 1,000 to 10,000 people, right? Followers on Instagram, for instance. And the sweet spot actually is the micro influencers who have between 10 and about 100,000 people, because of sort of the intimacy that people can have with them as far as the level of communication and the back and forth and the accessibility. But the visibility is sort of the sweet spot for a lot of brands out there. Well, the influencers have changed everything, right? They monetize Instagram, right, in some very real ways. We have affiliate marketing, brand partnerships, and then promotion actually of physical products. And that's part of the space now. And we have runners who go out and run every day, who train for races every day, and are compensated quite nicely in many instances, right, for the affiliation with these brands, whether it's wearables, whether it's treadmills, whether it's shoes, whether it's apparel brands, supplement brands, hats. I mean, you name it, of course, we see it, and it is the new wave of marketing. Listen, taking out a page or an ad in a magazine is still a thing, but print media used to be the only way it was done. Like I told you, Track and Field News, Runner's World, Sports Illustrated, Runner Triathlete News, I think, was a magazine, and they were few and far between. Now, Instagram, social media platforms have opened up the world, and it is effective. You have brand ambassadors, you have partnerships that influencers have with these brands, and it is a very symbiotic relationship where obviously they are able to monetize their space in the running space. The uncomfortable reality is, and I don't even find it uncomfortable, because listen, I internalized the fact that we are in an economy where market forces prevail. The reality of it is eyeballs on individuals who are promoting brands are what brands need to be able to sell their goods or their services. That's the way it works. And so we have this interesting intersection, right, where we have the brand influencers who are not just using Instagram, not just using TikTok, YouTube channels, right? And we see that, you get to, even 500 subscribers to a YouTube channel is a very, very low level of monetization. And then you get to 1,000, obviously, subscribers to a YouTube channel. You can start monetizing, right, your content on YouTube. So we have content creators and people who are actually incredibly creative souls it's sort of amazing, the talented people in this world that are sort of intimidating to me because, I mean, I have about one transferable skill, and that's my verbosity. And somebody had the bright idea of giving me a microphone, and I love this. But man, when I look at the short films, the videos, the clips, the cinematography that coincides somebody's existence in this running space where they train hard. I coach a lot of these people. They're running really, really fast in marathons. It's pretty cool. It's actually pretty cool when you look at it. And so you look at the earnings and you look at the way influencers make money. You look at not just the number of followers that they might have on Instagram, for instance. I talked about, the nano, the micro, the macro, and then the mega influencers being people typically over 1 million followers, right? So it's not just the number of followers, although I think that that's incredibly impactful, and I think that we all know that, right? But you also have to look at their audience demographics. We look at their engagement rate, right? And then you have sort of content niche existences where maybe they don't have 1 million followers, but maybe they have, you look at them, they don't necessarily have 1 million followers, right? But they might have 11,000 really, really, really avid followers and sort of a niche in the market to where they're able to monetize that. When you look at professional running and you look at how pros are paid, professional runners, and I'm just going to go ahead and call it like it is, don't have a reputation for wanting to or having the time. And a lot of it is the time and the energy to truly perfect their craft at the level of being world class. When I say world class, I mean making it into the pro fields at world majors, winning large regional marathons, being able to perfect their craft, be able to have the chance to make global championships, represent your country, world championships, Olympic Games. If you're in the British Commonwealth, the Commonwealth Games, South America, represent your country in the South American Championships. This is brutal stuff. When I say brutal stuff, I mean when you look at the training, 130 miles a week, 140 miles a week of training sometimes, 2 hard workouts a day many times, a level of deep-seated fatigue that it's hard to explain, where your soul sometimes creaks when you just crawl out of bed. And listen, I've run my 85, my 90, I've run my 100-mile weeks in my time. I have. It's a depth of commitment, and it's a depth of fatigue that is just sometimes unfathomable, and it requires a level of commitment, and it requires so much of your cerebral bandwidth and your physical bandwidth that I think that sometimes being completely dedicated to the professional running space can be lonely. It can be an endeavor that is characterized by not just fortitude, but solitude. One of my really close coaching friends, who's coached multiple NCAA champions, Olympic medalists, refers to it as hunkering down, right? Well, hunkering down, I think that concept is pretty well understood to be that you sort of go beneath the radar, right? You go off the grid, so to speak, to some degree, right? Social media influencers have the pressures of doing the opposite. Brands are not paying social media influencers to go dark. Brands don't want to collaborate with content creators and social media influencers to be below the radar. They want you on the radar. They want you in the spotlight. They want you turned on. They want you turned up. For lack of a better way of putting it, much higher percentage of the time than a professional athlete who's paid essentially almost solely to go and run fast, get results, finish in the top 10, top 15 at world major marathons, win regional races, qualify for global championships, go make money, be seen at the front of races wearing a Hoka jersey or a Nike jersey, be seen at the front of races in a pair of Saucony racing shoes, and that's the return, right? And so you have this intersection where you have people entering races, people training for races, people training quite hard, okay? Influencers train hard too. I coach influencers who run 70, 80, 90 miles a week. I coach professional runners who run 80, 90, 100 plus miles a week. But the existence in the space that they operate in, and the way they monetize their space, figuratively in the running industry and physically on the starting lines, can be quite different. All right, everybody, let's talk about a fueling subject that's near and dear to my heart and is part and parcel of almost every conversation with the athletes I coach. What gel do you use is the one that I ask. And why? Because it is the most difficult thing for people to nail down. Too sweet. They upset my stomach. I don't like the consistency. They don't have enough sodium. All those problems are solved by Go Gels. If you look on the back of this, you're not going to see any unrecognizable ingredients. With 110 milligrams of sodium, they have some of the highest sodium content of any of the gels on the market. And with the 24 grams of carbohydrate, you get that nice balance that's going to be able to fuel you through your biggest workouts and your big races. We have a nice array of flavors. We've got apple cinnamon that tastes like apple pie. We have a nice tangy but not overly sweet mixed berry, and then we have mango. We also have the best caffeinated gels on the market. We got mixed berry, we got apple cinnamon that just got launched, and I'm here to tell you, you need to go and buy boxes and boxes and boxes of these things. Low GI issues, you have a powerful punch of your sodium and your carbohydrates, and I'm telling you right now, you get into the game with the BPN Go gels, you're not likely to go back. So dump the gels that have been giving you GI distress, that have not been fueling you properly because you're not getting quite enough sodium. You're not really getting enough bang for your buck when it comes to your carbohydrates. Go buy a box of BPN Go gels. You will never go back. If you look at, for instance, the Diamond League track meets, which is a group of professional track meets that are held every year, and most of the meets are in Asia, the Middle East, most of them are in Europe, and then one meet in Eugene, Oregon every year they comprise the Diamond League, right? And that is $18 million in prize money and promotional money that these athletes earn across all the events in these meets every season. And then you look at road racing, Boston Marathon, $150,000, right? For the winner of the Boston Marathon, about $1.2 to $1.3 million prize purse at the Boston Marathon alone. And then you can imagine you've got London, you've got Berlin, you've got Sydney, you've got New York, Chicago. Those are the world majors, right? And then, of course, you've got regional marathons with $2,000, $3,000, $5,000 in prize money to win, races from the Jersey City Marathon to Indianapolis to the California International Marathon, right? This is the money that's in professional running, and that's outside of the contracts, right, that athletes might have with Brooks or Nike or Saucony. But it's very top heavy. It's very, very top heavy. And then you go just below that crust that's at the top, and you see a whole lot of people who are working incredibly hard, running themselves almost into the ground, running themselves ragged, so to speak, and doing it for the love of the game, doing it for the love of the sport, and they have that deep-seated weariness in their soul, that almost like that sort of weathered, almost like a old leather baseball glove that you get from running 100 miles a week for months and years on end. And a lot of them do it for very little in return, right? And it's interesting because I coach both. And when you look at these huge marathons that have a $500 million impact on their locales, New York, Chicago, Boston, 3 big ones here in the United States. Some a little less than 500 million, some up close to $600 million impact. But we've got, massive impacts to the local economies. You have influencers descending on these cities, flying into major airports from all over the world. You've got the world's greatest runners descending on the airports in these cities from all over the world, whether it's coming in from Nairobi, whether it's coming in, from Madrid, coming in and everybody showing up, everybody coming to the same race, and the gun goes off and everybody's got one heart, one set of lungs, 2 legs, and everybody's running exactly the same 26.2 mile distance. You don't get that in the NFL. Everybody doesn't get to run out of that tunnel onto the field at the Super Bowl, right? Everybody doesn't get to run out of that tunnel on the field in just a mid-season game, right? But everybody gets to run out of the proverbial tunnel onto the field in Berlin, the streets of New York, the streets of Chicago, where I've already been this fall, the streets of Indianapolis, the streets of Sacramento. Everybody runs out of the same tunnel, and it's fascinating to see it. Now, I think, when you look at the existence of the athletes and the way they go about their craft and the way they go about living, I actually talk to my athletes, and I coach influencers and I coach professional runners, right? It's interesting to me because when you look at the existence, for instance, here is one of the, this is the fastest professional woman who I coach right now. And this is what she had to say. When you're unsponsored, every mile is earned the hard way. It means betting on yourself when no one else is cutting the check. You live like a pro long before anyone pays you like one. It's not glamorous, it's gritty, disciplined, and fueled by a belief in big goals that you've proven to yourself are possible. You work like a pro without the perks. There's very little validation. There's certainly no guarantees, just hunger. Being unsponsored means being funded by belief and fueled by big goals. And she is passionate. She's talented. She is resolute. She's dedicated. She's tougher than raw meat and nails and wouldn't have it any other way. And that's what you do when you're running 90 to 100 miles a week and you're cranking out mile after mile at, in many days, under 5:30 pace per mile, right? And your time's gonna come, or it might not. And that's the reality for some people who are immensely talented, who are not content creators by definition, and who are not in the influencer space. Juxtapose that with another one of my athletes who works virtually equally as hard, who does not have any delusions about going to the Olympic Games, about qualifying for a global championship, but the talent actually could be there and could work into that. But, she's an influencer. And when you look at her existence, it's fascinating because it's just as valid. It's just as legitimate in the running space. It can be hard to turn down brands and races when you already have something on the calendar. We make money from racing, and partnerships are around races. So it's tough when you actually are focused on trying to have longevity in the sport and actually getting faster. Not just racing to race, though. My followers actually really respect me, and they respect that the hard work that I put in and that I care about actually trying to get faster. It can be exciting, I think, to follow along rather than just going out and watching me try to just jog races. I want to capitalize on the races I'm doing and be my very best, but also be the best for my collaborations and for my partners when I line up at races. And this has worked well for me. I'm grateful for brands who support me and respect me, and that I want to be engaged in the process of the sport. And it's interesting because the pressures are very real. And when you look at influencers, I think that there is the pressure. And this is just me being a coach who grew up in this. I ran my first race in 1983. And then in the last several years, I've watched this grow. The pressures are very real for everybody. For influencers, it's, I got to be up to this race. Treadmill company X, suppa company Y is going to pay me XYZ to go and run Chicago. But I also have a bib to New York, and apparel company Z, right? And wearable company D wants to pay me to go and run the New York Marathon. Well, those two races are 4 weeks apart, right? 3 weeks apart. And the pressure is there because that's how you make your money. And the pressure is there, and the pressure is very, very real. And that is part of the process, right? And so people say, well, why are you running so many races? Well, I mean, that's what you're paid to do. That's how you keep your sponsors. That's how you keep your collaborators. That's how you keep the brands that want to invest in you, because you have 150, 200,000, 500,000 Instagram followers, eyeballs on products, help sell the products. That's the way it works. The pressures are very real. And so that delicate balance, right, of wanting to progress in the sport, being serious about training, but also being an influencer, there's a balance there. You have to weigh your options. You have to weigh your opportunities. You have to look at the pluses. You have to look at the minuses of navigating this sort of this minefield of expectation. Look at the pro runner. And when I say pro runner, I mean the person who is paid by maybe a single shoe sponsor, a couple of endemic sponsors, to simply go out and run races. Your job is to train hard and race. That's pretty much it. The pressures are not always dissimilar. I remember when I was coaching an athlete back in 2019, the pressures were very, very real for them to run X race because, this shoe company said that I need to run this many races per year, right? And they want me to achieve this in these certain races because I have incentive-based contract. And for me to be able to sign my contract the next year, I need to do this. And then that leads to racing when you have a sore Achilles tendon. That leads to possibly racing when you are not in a state of fitness that you would want to be to run that race. That means racing when you might feel sick, and not just showing up and running the race to completion to the satisfaction of a brand or a collaborator, but needing to actually achieve a result either via place or time on a clock. The pressures are so real. And the pressures are there for everybody. It's just the way many people go about making their money, the way many people go about existing in the running space and coexisting in the running space can be quite different. Now, I think we have some running purists. And the purists, of course, are the ones that fought progress. And I don't even want to necessarily say purists, but people who believe, well, this is just supposed to be just running. And obviously, the AAU fought it. The IAAF fought it. Frankly, even the Athletics Congress and on some level, USA Track and Field has had to have a reckoning with how we go about balancing the competitiveness of the races and how people are paid, how people are compensated, and the legitimacy of the sport in the larger sports context, the larger sports world in the United States. All of these things have to be considered. The purists, and I don't want to necessarily refer to them as purists, but the people who are sort of the gatekeepers. They view themselves as the gatekeepers of the sport, view certain people who are bringing more eyeballs, bringing more participation, mostly from the non-professional, from what we refer to as the age groupers, right? In marathons, 10Ks, half marathons, nation and worldwide. A lot of the quote unquote gatekeepers view some people as, I don't know, I'm going to go ahead and call it like it is, sort of trespassers, sort of in their sort of niche sport that, started in the 50s and the 60s. And then, of course, really the 70s and 80s is when it got rolling, right? Some, not many, right? And as a coach, it's really interesting because I coach both. I have been asked to coach both. I want to coach both. I coach really, really hardworking influencers. And I know of some, influencers out there who aren't fully invested in the training and don't worry about the ins and the outs. They're not super stressed out about being super meticulous with their training. You get both. Listen, man, I get some people who I coach who might have 57 Instagram followers who are lackadaisical with their training, don't put a whole lot into it, don't worry about it. Hey, no crime committed. Go out, enter a race, go run for fun. Who cares? And then, of course, I coach aspiring Olympians. I coach runners who have run in international championships outside of the United States. I coach runners who have made the pro field and has competed in the pro fields at the Boston Marathon, the Chicago Marathon, California International Marathon, the U.S. Olympic trials. And they are, view themselves as quote unquote just runners or mostly just runners. Here's what's interesting though. Endemic sponsorships, as of late are not going away, but they're receding, drying up, pulling back. And what endemic sponsors are companies that earn their money by selling products that are specific to the sport of running shoes, certain wearables, and apparel are examples of endemic sponsors. But endemic sponsors and endemic companies who make products are trying to sell their products, right? Running shoes are worn by everybody who runs races, not just the pros, obviously. Knight's apparel, is worn by everybody who runs races, not just the pros. Well, it's interesting because obviously the most eyeballs are on influencers, and that's okay. Influencers help drive sales for a lot of companies who don't and no longer have to just try to do one-way communication with the customer, which is taking out an ad in the back of Runner's World magazine as they did in 1988. They don't have to take out just an ad in Track and Field News for a Casio watch or a Timex watch to try to sell a runner a watch. Well, now somebody with 78,000 Instagram followers can say, hey, I wear these shoes. I like them. You should wear them too. And so one of the challenges as a pro runner is that almost every pro runner at this point, in fact, I would venture to say literally every pro runner has an Instagram handle. They have an Instagram account, possibly Facebook, TikTok, right? And so you look at somebody with equal number of high places in marathons, regionally, nationally, similar personal bests at various distances from the mile to the marathon, even ultra marathons. But then the problem is if one might have, a social media following of 80,000 people and the other one has 800 people, then it's natural that brands are going to gravitate toward them. So then we get the push-pull. And I'm seeing it every step of the way. I have runners who are trying to garner contracts with not only just endemic sponsors, right, but sponsors that are not necessarily endemic to the sport, like car dealerships is an example, right? Companies that sell, mattresses, whatever it is, right? Is those partners, those corporate partners, they want eyeballs on their products. And so partnering with somebody who's not only incredibly fast, but who has a dynamic personality, who has a dynamic Instagram presence, a dynamic social media presence, may end up winning out in the day when there's a limited amount of funds that are dedicated by these corporate partners to sponsorships. The reality of it is eyeballs win. Eyeballs win. And when I say like it or not, it doesn't really factor in as much as you either accept what is or you accept what is not. And that's a really, really difficult thing. I'm a performance coach. When I grew up, I ran in my first Junior Olympics actually in the summer of 1986. That same year that the Boston Marathon first offered prize money. I ran in my first AAU Junior Olympics when I was 11 years old. And every step that I ran in my career was simply to get a time on a clock. I have to admit that. Or a place at a state meet, or a conference championship, or an NCAA championship. I had the joy of running at all of those levels. The only thing that mattered was the time on the clock and what place I got, because there was nothing in it for me. There was no influence. There was no internet. The internet barely existed even when I ran in the NCAA championships in 1994, okay? Dial-up was king. There was no high-speed internet in 1994. I can tell you this, right? But it's different now. And so the realities for competitive runners, when you look at the NCAA, we've got NIL, name, image, and likeness. Your image, your likeness is what people see on Instagram. Your image and your likeness is what people see on television. Well, now it's legal for you to be able to have corporate partners and to have collaborations with people who sell anything. I mean, a football player at University of Nebraska, famously named the Coldest, had a partnership with an HVAC company. I'm not making this stuff up. You guys can go and look it up yourselves, right? And so now we have this interesting push-pull where the internet is here to stay, obviously. Social media is how businesses conduct business. Listen, I would be a hypocrite. As a performance coach, okay? Because that's my goal is get you from the starting line to the finish line as fast as possible in many instances, right? But I would be a hypocrite if I said that I did not benefit from the very platforms that the gatekeepers, right? And I came from the era of the gatekeepers. A lot of the gatekeepers are old cranky guys like Jeff Cunningham, right? I would be a hypocrite if I said I had not benefited from social media space. I would be a hypocrite if I said I did not benefit from the visibility that comes with the modern technologic era, the modern internet age. The reality is we have this push-pull conundrum at this point, and we see that there is a commingling of people being influencers and being pros. Here's the challenge. Professional athletes, as I stated before, have such massive demands on their mental capacity, on their attention to detail, on their dialed-innedness. Is that a word? I think I just made up a word, the dialed-innedness that it takes to literally be at that razor's edge where 3 minutes is literally the difference between a catastrophic race and a transformative race, and eschewing the trappings of social media influence and taking selfies and making videos during races is something obviously that is needed. It's part of the space of being a professional runner. But the reality is we have to look at the risk of loss of income for social media influencers if they don't do their job for their brands. You don't show up, you're not going to be able to help out the brand that has entrusted you with helping get eyeballs on their products, whether it's treadmills, whether it's shoes, whether it's hats, whether it's wearables, apparel, what have you. You risk injury, obviously, by having to run sometimes 5, 6 marathons a year, 2 marathons in a month. Sometimes we'll see people run 2 marathons in a 2-week span. Those are the pressures that are endemic to being an influencer. You get neurologic fatigue, scattered focus, reduced performance, and then we have backlash. The gatekeepers, in some cases, don't want people filming themselves while they're running races. We have some cases where, and this is my personal editorialization, you shouldn't have somebody on an e-bike weaving in and out of people on a race course because it endangers the people on the course, and it really then starts to erode the competitive integrity and the integrity of the event when these types of things are going on. But it doesn't mean that somebody taking a video or taking a picture of themselves while they're running, that's not a big deal. In my opinion, I'm just editorializing here. Who cares, right? Listen, nobody's running 5-minute mile speed at the front of a marathon doing that. If somebody is doing that, running 6.5-minute miles, 7-minute miles, so be it, right? The other side, the professionalism, the amount of work, the amount of attention to detail that professional athletes have to engage in, to go out and run 15 miles a day, go out and run 2 workouts a day sometimes, literally run to the point where they're lying in bed wondering if they can crawl out of bed to put both feet on the floor to go and do it again and again and again. Just wearing down the rubber on the soles of their shoes, one step at a time, thousands of miles, sometimes in a 2-month, 3-month span. It is something that is unbelievable to watch. It's incredible to coach. The fortitude and the toughness of these people garners my utmost respect as their coach. And I think that respecting the running space, respecting the sport that had its roots in the original Olympic Games, right? 1896, the very, very first Olympic marathon was run. I think that mutual respect is possible in this interesting space where professional runners and influencers are attempting to earn a living. They're attempting to carve out sort of a monetized space on shared finish lines, shared streets, shared neighborhoods all over the world. And as a coach, I coach both, as I've said multiple times here. And I have so much respect and I have so much insight because I know these people. I talk to them on the phone every day. And I can tell you that the influencers who I coach show up to these starting lines resolute. They show up with their jaws set. They show up passionate about trying to achieve a goal. And they've worked incredibly hard, both at their job, which is to be influencers, but they've worked equally as hard in most instances when it comes to training for these races. And I can tell you that the professional runners I coach are just tough as nails. These people are literally dedicating their souls. Every little fiber, every strand of their DNA goes into these races. The level of toughness, the level of ability to self-inflict discomfort is something that is so astronomically high that it's almost unfathomable. I think the levels of pain and the toughness that these people can achieve and put themselves through in the quest for individual greatness, in the quest to do justice to what I believe is one of the greatest sports on earth. And so it's an interesting time that we live in. And social media is not going away. The next social media platform is inevitable. We had MySpace, then Facebook, then Instagram, and we've got TikTok and stuff that my 50-year-old boomer brain can't comprehend, quite frankly. I don't know what button to push half of the days on my cell phone, but I know how to push the buttons on a stopwatch. And I know how to time intervals. I know how to time repeats. And it doesn't matter if you're an influencer, if you're a content creator, or if you're somebody who's chasing an Olympic dream. I will coach you all the same, and I will respect you all the same. And I just love the fact that we are in a sport that is so unique, where we can all share space on the streets and on the starting lines together in pursuit, at the end of the day, at the crack of the gun, to be the fastest that we can be when we get to that finish line, because at our essence, we have shared goals. And with that, I've really enjoyed this conversation. I have unique perspective on this as a grizzly old guy who has sort of come up through the non-paying era into this modern era. And with that, I just really, really want all of you all to finish off your marathon season, to have a great year. Let's tread into 2026. Let's march into 2026 with big goals, no matter what they are. Never apologize for chasing your goals, and never apologize for the investment in you, no matter what that investment is. So y'all go be good, but seriously, be consistently good. All right? Coach out.